This is Linda Unaland. I'd like to welcome back Ryan Ostry to Suicide Undone. Ryan, the podcast we did a few months ago, which was entitled Man Shares How He Overcame Major Depression, was very popular, received a lot of views. And I imagine that there's a lot of people out there that are struggling with depression and really appreciated the wisdom that you imparted in that podcast regarding your own experience. For those people that haven't seen that podcast, if you could please give us just a summary of your experience with depression, how did it come about, and what type of things helped you. There are some specific things I'd like to elaborate on today, which is why I decided to do the part 2 and have you back. But welcome, and please feel free to share about your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, thanks for having me again. I obviously enjoyed it a lot last time, and I'm looking forward to chatting for a few minutes now. So I guess just kind of the synopsis of our first meeting. I had a very, very routine small wisdom tooth surgery in the very beginning of 2013. And obviously this is something that the majority of people will have throughout their lifetime. And for whatever reason, after I had this, there was a numerous amount of different physical and mental hurdles that I had to basically overcome. Vertigo, dizziness, my perception of the world changed. I had a lot of issues with my sight. I just kind of some unforeseen circumstances for whatever reason. And, at that time I was seeing, because I was trying to seek out multiple different doctors because nobody really knew what was going on, whether it was ophthalmologists, neuro-ophthalmologists, regular physicians, you name it, and nobody really knew what was going on. That led me to being hospitalized in May of 2013. And I was in the psych ward for a week. And that was actually the first time that I've ever taken any type of pills before, for antidepressant and anti-anxiety pills. And ever since then, I have continued to be on antidepressant and anti-anxiety pills as well. But yeah, in a span of just a few months, there was just, every day seemed like it was getting longer and longer. I felt like there was no doctor that could help me because they didn't know what was going on. I honestly didn't know what was going on. So obviously it was very, very terrifying in so many different ways. But it really opened, now, obviously hindsight's 2020, it really kind of opened up my perspective on mental health and alluding to the field of mental health, right? Because I think that there still is a stigma. And if I didn't go through these life-changing, life-altering situations, whatever you want to call it, I wouldn't be able to talk about it, obviously, and then help people the way that I am now. And so, was it life-altering and life-changing? And did I think that I was going to not make it out of that situation? Yes. But looking back on it now, I know that it's helped kind of mold and shape me into the person that I am now, and being able to talk about these type of issues.
I can imagine how bewildering that must have been for you at the time, especially not having any answers or solutions in the moment. And I'm so glad that you were able to make it through. Now, you did become suicidal at some point during that phase in your life.
Correct. I was.
And so you had said combination of medication and therapy helped you And I think one of the great things is that you were so inspired to help other people using your negative experience. And that has really been a wonderful contribution that you made. I was looking at your Facebook page recently, and you were talking about stopping mental health pitfalls. And I want to invite you to talk a little bit more about that in terms of, you mentioned three things in particular, which is the med maze, the therapist tango, and the empty phrases, which I thought I really like how you worded those. Can you tell us a little bit about the med maze and what were your experiences in trying to find the right type of medication?
Yeah, I think that everybody's situation is very different, right? We're all predispositioned and born a certain way, and what might work for me might not work for you, and vice versa. So there was definitely kind of a carousel of trying to find out what the right cocktail was for me in regards to medication. So that can be very, very almost debilitating and frustrating, because there are so many different types of medication, and whether it's anti-anxiety medication or antidepressants, again, one might be able to work for me that might not be able to work for the other person. So just kind of going through that whole situation was very, very tough. There was a whole lot of trial and error, and that can also set you back mentally as well if you hypothetically get on a medication or two or three or however many you're on, and it doesn't react well to your body, and then again, like I just mentioned, it can kind of delay you even more. So I definitely went through that, and it was very, very frustrating. Kind of what you mentioned regarding the med maze. So I came across a specific gene test that is very, very easy to do. It's essentially a cotton swab in your mouth. And what it does after, maybe 2-3 weeks of going back to the labs and doing whatever they need to do, you get a entire packet of what basically what medications would work best for you and why they would work best for you because of the way that you were born with that. It just all going back to the DNA in your body. So
The genes, yeah, it's amazing.
yeah, it was very interesting. I obviously never heard about it before, and it worked for me. I know that, like I mentioned, there's been a $2,000 dollar reduction as far as healthcare costs. And again, it's not something that everybody will do. But I think that in my opinion, I highly recommend it. It can kind of give you a larger scope and picture of knowing your body a little bit more, and the things that can contribute to making you better as far as having better mental health going forward with the things that you're actually putting in your body.
It's almost like cutting to the chase, and it's so specific to your genes. I came across the term for that is called pharmacogenia, and it's testing genes and how they affect the body's response to drugs, which it's amazing. I'm pretty sure as time goes on, they're going to perfect this more and more, and it's going to be even more widely available. I did ask one of the psychiatrists in the agency that I work in, and he had not heard of this. He said he has heard of it used for AIDS treatment, but not for depression. So I think that maybe as time goes on, it will become more and more known and utilized, which is great. I think in the field of psychiatry, there is a very wide range of competencies. I remember one time working in the jail, and I came across a female inmate who was quite manic. She was really manic. She would take off her clothes and just jump up and down in her cell. And when she came to her right mind, she expressed such gratitude to the psychiatrist for being able to figure out the right combination of medications that worked for her. And what she verbalized to me at the time is that she, in effect, lost 10 years of her life in going to psychiatrists that weren't able to figure it out. Because if you think about it, it's not just one medication, but it could be any number of combination of medications. So it takes a great deal of patience and also skill and experience in being able to find that right match. So this is something I'm very enthusiastic to hear about. Maybe as more and more intelligence develops, they'll be able to use this approach for a variety of different illnesses, not just the mental illnesses.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, so and so this particular test was recommended for you. And how long a process did that take? Did it work right away for you?
Yeah, so kind of like I alluded to, you get this basically a kit mailed to you, and it's just kind of a cotton swab that you do, and then that gets sent to the labs wherever it gets sent to. And then it's maybe 2-3 weeks. I don't specifically remember the waiting time for it. And then you get all the information back, and then you can go over that with your psychiatrist or therapist or whoever, and they can kind of walk you through everything, what it means, and why this specific type of medication might work for you, why it might not work for you. And it's really fascinating stuff. It's like I mentioned, I never knew that it existed. And I know that a lot of people, even to this day, kind of like you mentioned, that are within the field of psychology that don't know that it exists. So I was very fortunate that I came across that, and yeah, I think that it's it can do wonderful things for people.
Yeah, for sure. I have heard of this type of testing in being able to detect if you have a predisposition to a specific illness, such as cancer. Is that something that they tested you for, to see if you had specific gene for depression, and whether maybe in the course of the surgery that you had, whether the anesthesia somehow might have unlocked that or unmasked that and brought about the illness? Do you know if you have a gene for depression?
I do. As far as the anesthesia, that part was not included the within the DNA testing. But yes, as far as having that gene, that is something that they were also able to pinpoint that is something that I was predispositioned with.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. So tell us a little bit about the selection of therapists. I know that that is a crucial component also in the recovery process of depression, as are the medications, but ideally they work hand in hand, having the right combination of medications or the right type of medications, but in conjunction with that, also finding the right therapist that maybe the personality or the therapeutic approach is best suited to the person. So you called it a therapist tango, and you said that there are some proven strategies in order to be able to select the right therapist. So please tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that for me specifically, I think it's almost synonymous with the medication, right? When I mentioned the carousel, so you could go through one therapist or 100 therapists, and it's just kind of trying to find who's best suitable for you. I've had multiple different therapists, and I think that every therapist brings something new to the table. And I've tried, for me specifically, because I've been in different types of therapy, whether it's DBT or EMDR or cognitive behavioral therapy or diffusion. There's specific things from each therapist and each different type of therapy that I have worked well for me. And those things that I've gained, that knowledge, I use on an everyday basis. And again, what might work for me might not work for other people. But there are, several different techniques and strategies from each type of therapist and different types of therapy that I have continued to utilize to this day. And I think that when somebody is maybe, let's just say, new to therapy, right? They don't know what type of therapy they want. They don't know how therapy works. I think that just being very selective and careful, and you know yourself the best, right? Nobody's inside your head except for you. So whatever you're specifically going for and whoever you are most comfortable with, I think that is huge into playing a role, how to kind of come out as happier, more at peace, whatever you want to call it. And just being more selective and being patient with trying to find the right therapist that works specifically for you is what I would recommend, at least.
So in your experience, it's the personality as much as the technique of the therapy that is impactful. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, and I mean, for me personally, my first therapist uh, I had for, I don't specifically remember, maybe 5 or 6 years, and he wasn't the first therapist that I tried to work with. I had to go through a handful before I found this therapist, and I was very, very appreciative of everything that we worked on together. And because I was younger, I believe I was 19, I wanted to find somebody that could also be somewhat of a mentor towards me and could not just provide different coping strategies or techniques that would help me, but would just kind of be almost like a big brother, or, like I mentioned, a mentor, or somebody that I could essentially learn more about life with, and that would be patient with me, and that would kind of explain more of the ins and outs of therapy, and how how our mind works and different things like that. So I had a specific list that I wanted to check off, and this specific therapist was able to do that for me, and that's why I was fortunate, and I stuck around with him and worked with him for 5 or 6 years.
I always tell people it's important to commit to the process. So often a person might seek out a therapist, and for one reason or another, they discover it's not the right match. Maybe the therapist is too aggressive or too passive, and that is kind of clashes with their personality or expectations. And that's fine to move on if you find, like you said, you know yourself best. And if something is not working for you, there's no need to stick with that particular situation, but be open to trying out a new experience. And so that commitment, I think, is so important. Really, it's a commitment to recovery versus just abandoning the process after one failed attempt to find the right therapist. It's not always going to be from the first shot that you find that right person. So it is really very important to have patience with that process.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Tell us a little bit about what you call empty phrases, such as just get over it, or smile more, or don't think like that. It sounds simplistic to say, but usually those things are not very effective, and sometimes even leaves the person feeling that no one truly understands what they're going through. So do you, from your experience, do you have some practical techniques that have empowered you to regain control?
Yeah, so what I would say to that is that even though, in my opinion, the stigma has gotten better, there obviously is a stigma over mental health. And for somebody that hasn't gone through a situation like actually being clinically depressed and having clinical anxiety and contemplating suicide and everything else that comes with depression, I think that it's easy for folks to just kind of say, hey, you know what, toughen up, or smile more, or fake it till you make it, or whatever phrase that you want to say. And I don't necessarily think it's them being ignorant, but as far as empathy goes, it's difficult to have that because, again, unless you have a MRI or CAT scan on your brain and you can actually see the depletion of serotonin and dopamine, you can't really tell just from if you have a conversation with somebody, because someone can be able to put on a show or a smile. And, if somebody sees that and they say, okay, well, see, you just smiled, or, oh, you just laughed at this joke, so you should be fine. You're not clinically depressed. You don't have anything wrong with you, whatever you want to call it. Excuse me. And I think that for people that are actually going through depression, if you can have some coping strategies, techniques, things that will carry with you for the remainder of your life, that's something that will actually help and will be able to change you for the better. So yeah, that's just a little bit of what I meant by when I alluded to those phrases.
So those are the proverbial tools in the toolbox, right? That once you have them, you could take them out at any time during the course of your life, because we know that it's this life is always going to have challenges. Actually, what are the statistics? The statistics are, according to the World Health Organization, more than 280 million people worldwide suffer from depression. And I can only imagine now, with the state of the world, the way it's going. COVID is one thing, but certainly all this turmoil that's happening presently with conflicts in Israel and in Ukraine and Russia, and seeing all these images, horrible images, I can only imagine even someone who doesn't have that predisposition to depression, it's you're human, you're going to be affected in some way by this, and also the fear and anxiety of what will be. How does this world regain stability? How could we go back to the way it used to be when we didn't have to worry about these things?
Right.
So tell us a little bit about guided imagery. Is that a technique that you found helpful for yourself?
So for me, yes. Again, kind of alluding back to figuring out what works best for you. So whether it's guided imagery, mindfulness, meditation, whatever you want to call it, there's so many different types. For instance, I struggle with being able to paint a specific picture in mind when I'm doing different tactics like mindfulness or guided imagery. So I had to find specific types that I would um, be able to picture and imagine, and I'd have to be in a specific place, whether it's listening to calming music and having no lights on, and really focusing on uh, um, the story or whatever I'm trying to imagine in my mind. And it's difficult. Some people struggle with it more than others. I'm one of those. I'm one of those people. And it, just like anything, it takes a lot of practice to be able to essentially get your mind right and uh, continue to practice being able to put yourself in a position that can make you vulnerable and can be very difficult to achieve if that's something that you struggle with.
We are so lucky in a lot of ways that we live in this modern age because there is help literally available at the click of a mouse through YouTube. There are so many wonderful life coaches that can explain and have suggestions. So I see that as being a very important adjunct to therapy because having conceptual understanding of things and again developing the toolbox in many different ways. So one of these people on YouTube, Dr. Ali Matu, he mentioned developing 5 habits. And it seems a little bit simple, but I think there's definitely a lot of benefit. So he said, of course, when you're depressed, one of the things that goes out the window is the depression. I'm sorry, the motivation. A lot of people who are depressed don't find motivation to do things. So he suggested that there are 5 habits that you could develop. And once you do these things repetitively, it can really make a big impact on the depression. So he mentioned about cleaning, just walking into a space that's tidy and clean, and even just attending to personal cleanliness. Once you make that a habit, that could really impact the mood in a great way, as well as being outside, getting in touch with nature. Um, Often we lose sight of how healing nature can be. This is, at least in my neck of the woods here in New York, is a wonderful time. The leaves are just, once it starts turning, it's just really so majestic. And taking a nature walk can really fill up all the senses, including the smells of the leaves, just really magnificent. So I think, or sometimes, when you're depressed, it's very hard to find that motivation, but even something as simple as walking around the block or even opening up a window and taking in some fresh air, that can also be like a reset button and just offer just a glimmer of refreshment. Interacting with a living thing, whether it's a person or an animal, there's a lot to be said for pet therapy. And even if you don't own a pet, there are certainly ways through the SPCA or maybe even as simple as a pet store and just holding a puppy, something simple like that. And then this is one of my favorite things, checking off one thing, because we know in this busy modern life, we have always a multitude of things to do. And sometimes we become overwhelmed, like, oh my goodness, where am I gonna start first? And especially when all those things are pressing. But if you check off one thing, so I know for myself, I set a goal of 2 things a day. If I have a lot of things to do, my minimum would be checking off 2 things a day. If I could do more, great. But the day won't pass without my ensuring that I tackle at least two things. So by the end of the week, then that's really, progress that's made. Things like paying a bill, folding laundry, returning a message, procrastination can really be a big impediment. And then with each time you procrastinate, then that feeling of overwhelm could just kind of increase. So sometimes just partializing, starting small, it doesn't even have to be a huge thing. Putting order to one drawer at a time or a pantry. Sometimes you could think of it in terms of what is seasonally appropriate to do. If it's, around the time in your community where they do food drives, you could go through the pantry, take out things that you haven't used, and think about just kind of decluttering, which I think that decluttering definitely has an emotional component too. People who tend to hoard things, a lot of times that's a manifestation of some childhood trauma. And then finally, treating yourself, finding out the things that bring you soothing, and then engaging in those things, such as drawing, like you mentioned before, listening to music, or a bubble bath, or a favorite book. So all those things in combination, developing those habits can definitely move a person forward. But then there's another technique, and it's called the 3 good things exercise. So, for example, every day reflecting on what are 3 good things that happened, and what was your role in helping make it happen. Because I think having that sense of being effective in the world is really important as well. So I think, the goal is just really having a high level of happiness, right? Which is what we all want.
Excuse me. Yeah, I completely agree. Completely agree.
And so speaking of happiness, how do you live your best life, Ryan? What are the things that bring you happiness? Obviously, I know it wasn't always that, and it's sad that you lost a big part of your life to this depression, but it's also a wonderful development that you were able to overcome it. So, what are the things that bring you joy?
Yeah, absolutely. Pretty common run-of-the-mill type things. I love spending time with my family, my friends, my significant other. I'm a part of where I went to college, the Alumni Association, whether it's volunteering at the local homeless shelter, taking free classes at the library, maybe something that I want to know more about, and I could just go there and listen to a speaker speak on that specific subject. Going to the gym, reading. I try and constantly learn new things, whether it's about myself or just things that maybe I want to continue to grow and get better at, because I'm willing to sacrifice who I am now for someone that I want to become later. And I think that I'm constantly trying to improve myself. And for me personally, I'm not ever satisfied with my current state, because I always want to become better so I can influence other people and more people in a more positive way. So I mean, those are just a few hobbies that I have and things that I enjoy doing. But I'm definitely more of a busy bee, and like I mentioned, I'm definitely always trying to learn new things, acquire new habits, and just trying to be a better version of myself, so then I can be a better version for the people that are in my life.
Mm. What you said reminded me of something. I recently took a continuing education course through Institute for Brain Potential online. It's required for my social work degree to have continuing education. But one of the courses I took was the habits of people who are least likely to develop Alzheimer's or dementia. And what you just described is certainly one of them. Trying out new things, having new experiences, somehow this positively impacts the brain in combination with other things, of course, such as anti-inflammatory. I'm not talking about drugs, even foods. All that works hand in hand. It's so necessary to take care of the body as well as the mental health. And I think we spoke about that during the last podcast. I wanted to quote something that you said. If you want something you never had, you must be willing to do something you have never done. And that's a pretty powerful statement right there. I think there's a lot to be said for keeping open to new experiences. And, and there's a lot of success stories actually out there that are a testament to that, thinking outside the box or doing something creative that maybe other people haven't thought of it. So I was watching recently a documentary on the founder of, his last name is Schultz, about the guy that really made Starbucks such a success. And he had gone to Italy and he went to a coffee house. And he was so impressed with the experience that he had there of people knowing his name even. And he was so eager to bring this idea back to the United States. And he was working in Starbucks before he took it over. I think they were just selling coffee beans, and he proposed that to the owners. And they did not think it would be a good idea. They never tried it. P.S. He opened up his own under a different title. It was a smashing success, and Starbucks went bankrupt, and he bought them over. So that's just a simple example of what we're talking about, right? Is just why not think outside the box and implement new things? You never know where things lead, right? But there's certainly a lot to be said for human creativity and ingenuity.
Absolutely.
So, any last thoughts that you want to share with us?
No, I mean, like I mentioned, I really do appreciate you having me on here. And I think that even though it might be a platitude, I think that if we can just be more open with each other, it could be a forum just like this, right? It doesn't have to be a situation like this, whether it's a podcast or just talking to your friends or family and trying to break that stigma of, it's okay to not be okay. And, no matter what someone says, everyone's going through something. So just truly being kind to everybody, because they could put on a great face, but you never know what somebody's going through. So I think that if we just become more normalized, that to have a conversation as simple and easy as the one that we're currently having, and just being more thorough and upfront and honest with ourselves and with other people, I think that can have a huge positive impact, and that can kind of permeate throughout. It could just start with one person, and then it could be 10 people, and then 20 people, and then all of a sudden the impact that you're making will affect so many other people. And then that's just how it gets started. That's how we grow as a society. That's how we grow as people. That's how we grow as sons, daughters, boyfriends, husbands, wives, what have you. And I think that it just starts with having a conversation like that we're having now, and to be vulnerable and just to not be judgmental and really try to understand and have empathy for people that, maybe you haven't gone through this situation, but that doesn't mean that other people haven't. So that's one thing that I would say. That's definitely one thing that I try and get across, in regards to a message, because it's definitely something that we can all do and have control over doing. And it's obviously a very positive thing if we can continue to try and strive to do that.
I am so happy that as a society we've evolved, certainly from how it was years ago when nothing was talked about. And now there's such much greater understanding, even with diagnosing things early, like ADD or autism. So that knowledge has been very powerful. But I think that there's definitely room to continue that. And like I've made reference before, every time I hear about suicide, I get this awful feeling in my stomach because it is so preventable. If only it just requires reaching out for help and knowing that other people are going through that. And there are resources. Absolutely, there are resources. And speaking of resources, I want to invite you to share with us about the course that you've developed.
Yeah, so just briefly what it is, there's about 9 or 10 different courses. In each course, there's a specific lesson. So it could, just off the top of my head, there's about the gene testing. There is tactics and coping strategies and methods for diffusion, CBT, how we can relate better to our thoughts, and how to understand that a thought is just a thought and it doesn't make it necessarily true. There is, I talked about life coaches and follow-ups for people that maybe were hospitalized, and how to reintegrate themselves back into society, and the steps that they should take on how to do that in a positive way. Mindfulness, guided imagery, meditation, things like that. So it's not just tailored to one specific thing. There's kind of an umbrella of the whole mental health field, and things that have worked for me, and things that, for people that I've worked with and are currently working with, that works for them. So I'm really happy that I'm doing that, and I hope that it continues to have people, to move forward and to hopefully get a sense of happiness and peace and joy back into their lives.
God bless you that you developed that. How do people contact you if they're interested in partaking of your course?
Yeah, so again, there's not just one specific way. It could be on my Facebook page. It could be on my Instagram page. Obviously my name's on here, Ryan Ostry. My phone number, my email. I get contacted pretty frequently, and it's not just on one specific way. So again, I don't know if whatever people are comfortable with, I'll just say. But I would say the majority, especially lately, have been on Facebook. And it can just be a private message. Everything is obviously kept private between us, because everybody does have a different situation, and being vulnerable can be difficult at times. And I completely respect that, and I adhere to that, and that's the confidentiality. And yeah, I'm pretty open. I respond as quickly as I can. It kind of depends on my caseload with how many clients I'm currently working with, and kind of what's going on with that. But I can be reached through any of those platforms, and yeah, so.
I want to thank you once again for joining us. It was great to have you back and really appreciate the wisdom.
All right. Thanks, Linda. I appreciate it.
Take care.